What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, April 13th, 2017. We sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Dan is in our control room today, ready to answer the phone when you call on in, put you on the air with your questions and comments. And the war machine is moving ahead, obviously, and that's very frustrating for me because one of the main motives for doing what I've been doing for all these years was I could see this agenda to get us into a new world war to try and distract from all the other problems in the country. And I had really thought that with Trump's election, we had derailed the rush to World War III, and obviously that did not happen. War will have its way, ultimately, and we're having to deal with that ugly reality. The United States has, for the first time in actual combat, dropped the massive ordnance airburst bomb, the Moab, which is sometimes called the mother of all bombs. It's America's largest non-nuclear bomb, and they dropped it in Afghanistan on some caves. It's 26,000 tons of explosive. And it is a huge, huge bomb. It's been tested a couple of times. This is the first time that it's been used in combat under the very sort of generalized excuse that, hey, there's ISIS down there, and that was the reason that we went ahead and we did all of that. So we don't know what's going on. And what's really interesting, I noticed in the corporate media, every time they talk about the story, they show film and video from a test of this bomb back in 2003. They're not actually showing where this bomb was used and what it was used on. And obviously a bomb that large, which is designed to hit deep underground targets, it's still exploding on the surface, and that means anything around it, including civilians, are going to be wiped on out. But I'm sure the White House is going to come on out and say that ISIS had nuclear weapons down there. They had germs, they had chemicals, they had a Death Star, they had a big stack of overdue library books, and they had it coming to them. Or maybe it was just done to show other countries that we really do have an insane, psychotic government that is willing to do these things. Cruise missiles into Syria, Moab into Afghanistan, potentially nuclear strike into North Korea. And that kind of a terror campaign often has a flashback, as it were. Now then, little bit of an embarrassment going on for Donald Trump, because apparently when he had his little news conference with Fox Business, and he was talking about his dinner with Xi Jinping down in Mar-a-Lago, or I guess we should call it War-a-Lago now, and he was talking about this wonderful chocolate cake and everything, and then he goes and he says, we've just launched 59 missiles heading to Iraq. He can't even remember what country he's making war on here. And I think it's underscoring Trump isn't really in charge anymore. Somehow he's been co-opted. My favorite theory is they made a war Trump over there at Westworld. Anyway, we are seeing all these articles coming on out. Nobody's buying this original story about Assad gassing his own people, nor should they. Let's be, I mean, it was absurd on the face of it. And unfortunately, as that story continues to fall apart and the situation in Syria looks worse and worse in the political sense for the United States, I'm deeply concerned that this is what's motivating this rush toward confrontation in North Korea. So the corporate media next week can say, forget all about that Syria and Assad gas thing. That's old news here. Now we've got North Korea, and this is really horrible. But we're seeing articles in places like zcom.org, U.S. strikes on Syria based on a lie. And apparently the gist of this article is that the U.S. intelligence agencies knew that Assad had not dropped a military chemical weapon on innocent civilians in Idlib, and some of them are talking about going public on this before the situation spins out of control. Now, remember, the White House is out there saying, we know Assad did this. Went up to the United Nations, and everybody says, show us the proof. And Nikki Haley says, well, it's all classified. But trust us, we really know that that Assad did this. And, of course, nobody's going to pay any mind to that, because the U.S. claimed Assad gassed his own people in 2013 and 2014, and Saddam had nuclear weapons and all the rest of it, all of which were lies. So nobody's going to take the government's word about anything at face value. So then, earlier this week, they came out with this little document that looks like a hastily re-edited version of the 2013 claim that Assad was gassing his own people. The names and places were changed and so forth, and that was about it. And they held it up and said, here is the proof. Well, it isn't a proof. It's a government report with a bunch of accusations. And a government report is not proof of anything. Accusations are not proof of anything. And everyone was saying, okay, this report claims you've got all of this stuff. Let us see it. And now we are hearing from the White House that they cannot release this information because it will compromise sources and methods. How many times have we heard that before? When we tell the government, you must prove to us beyond a reasonable doubt that there is a just cause for this military action. And we're back to this same old thing. You just have to trust us. No, we do not trust you. We have been lied to way too many times. And in the absence of incontrovertible, verifiable proof of your allegations, the safe and prudent assumption is you're lying to us yet again. Liar, liar, pants on fire. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network. Now, Philip Giraldi is also out there saying that the intelligence community of the United States and much of the military are not buying this story either. And again, it was absurd on the face of it. Assad had all but won his war against the U.S.-backed rebels. Peace talks to end the war were starting. And 2 weeks ago, the White House was saying they were ready to accept Assad staying on as leader of Syria. And then all of a sudden, Assad says, oh, with everything going my way, I'm going to go ahead and do a gas attack on civilians, which will turn the tide against me and prolong the war. And it just didn't make any sense. There was no reason for him to do it, and every reason for his opponents to do it and frame him for it. Nobody bought this story. And all those corporate media prostitutes and correspondents who are out there trying to say, oh yes, Assad did it, I'm sure in their heart of hearts, they know it's a nonsensical story as well. But that's why they're paid those $1 million salaries, to keep their own thoughts to themselves and just read what's on the teleprompter as convincingly as they possibly can. Okay, yet another expert, highly decorated scientist by the name of Postol, has come on out, and he said this really doesn't work. He's pointed out all the flaws in the story. One of the few photos actually released that claims to be of a chemical weapon munition, he says it's obvious from the photo that the debris there didn't explode. Something exploded next to it, but that's it. And it just undermines it. There's nothing there to support this. And we've been down the road with mislabeled pictures before. Remember that trailer in Iraq, and we were all told, it's a mobile biological weapons laboratory. No, it was a balloon inflator. Remember when Colin Powell got up there at the UN and he had these black and white photos, very blurry, with these little fuzzy dots and arrows that said, this dot is a biological weapons transport vehicle, and this one is a decontamination. And you couldn't tell from the photos, and everybody was saying, why are you showing us black and white photos? All of our current surveillance satellites take images in color. And following the invasion of Iraq, inspectors went on out to the locations that were photographed, identified what had been photographed. It was ordinary firefighting equipment. Just lie after lie after lie. Now, Assad has gone on out and says that as far as he can tell, all these videos of dead children in the Syria chemical attack were faked, and we know that's true. We've all seen the one of the girl who's lying there motionless, and they're saying, oh, she's dead, and the camera passes her. Then the camera comes back a little bit, and she's opened her eyes to see if the camera's gone. And we link that to that story as well. And, of course, the corporate media, how dare Assad say something so horrible that we would fake picture evidence to try and... I am disgusted. I am totally disgusted. Again, George Galloway's out there saying Assad is not mad enough to carry out a chemical attack. There was no motive for him to do it. That's the missing piece by which we know this story was garbage. Now, Sergei Lavrov is still out there justifying Russia's veto of the UN Security Council resolution saying, we're not convinced Assad carried out chemical attacks. And by the way, we still haven't seen any proof of Russian-sponsored election tampering in last year's U.S. election. And they're just reminding everybody of all the lies, the sheer volume of lies coming out of Washington, D.C. And they should. Now, Nikki Haley is out there trying to bash Russia for refusing to go along with the Security Council resolution, which was written from the point of view of simply declaring up front Assad did it, and we have to take actions and find out more details. But the resolution was written on the assumption Assad really did it, and that's why Russia vetoed it, and that's why China abstained. And she's out there saying Russia's refusing accountability. And she even made the comment that by not going along with condemning Syria without any evidence, that Russia was being uncivilized. And that's actually a very deadly insult to a Russian, because a big part of their cultural identity is being cultured and being civilized. Now, the reality is that it is not Assad who is killing civilians in Syria and Iraq. Article coming out of RINF.com. Report by the British monitoring group Airways has found that the death toll from U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and Syria nearly quadrupled in the month of March as compared to the last full month before Donald Trump entered the White House. Reported civilian deaths jumped from 465 in December of 2016 to 1,754 in March of 2017. That's a rise of 277%, and certainly far more people than were claimed to have been killed in Idlib. Story coming out of Stephen Lenderman's blog. Flashpoint in Syria risks U.S. war on Russia, and that really is the crux of the problem. I know that I don't want the U.S. to go to war with Russia and China. I estimate we will lose. I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of people listening to this show are intelligent enough to understand all the reasons why we should avoid a new major global war. Unfortunately, we have a bunch of nutcases in power who think war is good. War will fix all the problems with this country. Because it worked the last two times. Crash of 1907, World War I, crash of 1929, World War II, crash of 2008, and we're off and running again. And actually, that is not exactly what happened. All the world wars did was mask all the domestic problems behind this high fever of, oh, there's a war on, there's a war on. Now, the U.S. economy improved after World War II because of the Bretton Woods Agreement, and the fact that all the other nations all across Europe and Asia had had their industrial base bombed into rubble. And so for a decade following the end of the war, everybody had to buy things from the United States of America, machine tools, drill bits, ball bearings, whatever. And that was what America's post-war prosperity was built on. And maybe that's the game plan again. Nuke the rest of the planet back to the Stone Age and offer to resell them all the things we just destroyed. So, another very alarming article, this one out of Investment Watch blog, relationship between Russia and the United States approaching the danger zone. There are two conflicting reports about what happened in Syria. Somebody is lying, obviously. And since Russia wasn't the one telling us Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, Saddam had nuclear bombs, he had germs, he had all the rest of it. Obviously, I'm going to give Russia the benefit of the doubt here, based on the long track record of lies we've seen coming from Washington, D.C. And everybody is very, very nervous about what's going on here. Over at Paul Craig Roberts' website, he's got an article, Is That Armageddon Over the Horizon? And it's crazy times. We got rid of the old fool in the White House. We got a new fool in the White House. Tillerson's running around the world, delivering ultimatums, thumping on his chest, making false accusations. And everybody's out there saying, Russia's preparing for hot war, North Korea's preparing for hot war. No, all these other nations are preparing to defend themselves from an obviously aggressor nation. We're the ones who've gone rogue. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm fine.
You see, sir, I want to ask you something, because I've been arguing with people about this United States attack in Syria. And see, sir, the common argument that they say that Donald Trump agreed to attack Syria because the opposition, like the Israel lobby or Jewish lobby or whatever you want to call it, the neocons, all these people, they threatened to blackmail Trump. If he doesn't bomb Syria, they're going to expose that Russia hacked into the election. But see, sir, I told some of these people it doesn't make any sense that if the opposition had the evidence that Donald Trump's election got hacked by Russia, why did they do this now? It doesn't make any sense that they do this now.
Good for you. Good for you.
If they had the evidence, then
Good. Yeah, you're thinking. Good for you. You did exactly the right thing there, and you have to encourage other people to just, does it make sense? And that is the most important question anybody should ask. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't make any sense. And, it's obvious Donald Trump has done a 180. We don't know for what reason. Is he being blackmailed? Is he being threatened? Did they show him the Zapruder film and say, hey, we can get away with killing presidents if you don't cooperate with us? This is what happened to the last president who decided to go his own way. Maybe his financial backers yanked his leash that they've got on him because of that financial backing. Or remember that video of Harry Reid on CNN. The intelligence agencies are lying to Donald Trump. They've got him completely cocooned in their own little matrix where what he thinks he's seeing as the real world is a carefully constructed fake to get him to do what everyone wants him to do. At this point, it doesn't really matter the why anymore. What matters now is we are back on that path to World War III, and we've got to find some way to derail it.
Yeah, because, see, sir, the thing is, if these people had the evidence to blackmail him, they would have done it from day one.
I agree. I mean, certainly, they would have overturned the election. They would have put Hillary in. There's no evidence. There's zero evidence Russia interfered with the election. There's absolutely none. It's another baseless allegation. What you need to do, what we all need to do, is just wake people up to the idea that government and corporate media lie to them not once, not twice, but all the time. That's why I wrote that article, Of the Liars, By the Liars, and For the Liars. Because rulers always lie to their people to control them. And we need to teach that to everybody so that they understand this is how they're being controlled. They're being fed fairy tales to get them to go along with what the rulers want them to do.
Yeah, thank you.
And again, you did the right thing. Good boy, download a cookie. You did the right thing. You thought it through. You thought about it, and you found where it did not make sense. So good for you. I'm proud of you. Okay, we're going to switch over to Donna in New Mexico. Aloha, Donna. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This bombing today in Afghanistan has really crossed my red line with Trump. I voted for him. I rolled the dice and thought, well, maybe there's a chance we're going to avoid a third world war, a better chance than we'd have with anybody else, and certainly I would never vote for Hillary Clinton. But at this point, I'm wondering if he's willing to drop that bomb, and it doesn't really achieve a purpose to drop that kind of bomb where he did, what else is he willing to do? Because I see on a daily basis now an escalation that I find quite unnerving. And I'm angry. I'm really angry.
Well, you should be angry. You know, to heck with anger management. It is time to be totally ticked off here. Donna, stay on the line. I want to continue this discussion after we come back from these few commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking with Donna in New Mexico. And all we know about the Moab being used in Afghanistan is it was dropped on ISIS. And they're not saying why or what ISIS was supposedly doing, or even exactly where this thing went down. All of the corporate media so far that I've seen they're all using footage from a 2003 test of the Moab and saying we just used it. And so we don't even know why. But it's very obvious that they're keeping the information very, very close because as large as it is, and it did explode above ground, anything in the area was wiped out along with whatever underground structure they were trying to crush with it. And that may mean more civilian dead. And right now, the U.S. government's very sensitive to that issue after something else that happened in Syria last night. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Trump may have dropped it just to prove to the rest of the world that our government has gone crazy and is ready and willing to use such weapons on a hair trigger.
Well, my concern is that if they're willing to do this, this is rapidly building.
Yes.
If they're willing to do this now, what else are they willing to do? And after today, because I don't see the purpose of dropping that bomb other than to send signals to other countries, specifically Iran and North Korea, and maybe others as well. I cannot believe that Trump diehard supporters are celebrating this. I have listened to some things today and read some things today that I just can't believe. Alex Jones among them, justifying, excusing, apologizing in his way, just saying, well, we're living in a different world. But that's not what he said when Trump was campaigning, and that's not what he said when Obama was doing things like this. So the hypocrisy here is really disturbing. And I find it, I don't know if you caught the little press moment that Trump had shortly after that bomb was dropped. He was joyous about it. So I have a hard time believing, that these people who keep defending him think that this man is somehow somebody that other than what he is.
Do you remember ever seeing the footage of Harry Truman's announcement about the use of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima when they announced
Yes.
to the world that they'd done this? I actually got to see the unedited version where before he's starting the speech, he's smiling and grinning ear to ear. He just thinks this is so great. And I think they're both victims of the adrenaline rush. Have you ever used a firearm, for example?
No.
Okay. Well, speaking as somebody who used to make and shoot black powder firearms, I will admit to it. The first time I fired off my Hawken gun, I was grinning ear to ear. Look what I just did. And that may be part of what's going on. But it does betray a degree of callousness all along. It depends. Again, we don't know exactly what was hit by that Moab, and we don't know if more civilians have been killed. It is very clear looking at the numbers from all these organizations that the U.S. is killing far more civilians than Assad is accused of doing. And the corporate media, we've got a dead child over here. Well, what about the millions of kids who literally starved to death in Iraq from a decade of sanctions? Oh, well, they don't matter. Only the dead kids that can be used to push the war agenda are of concern to America's corporate media. They're just totally overboard into propaganda right now.
I did hear an interview with an Afghan reporter on RT just about an hour ago, and he was reporting from that area. He said there wasn't a dwelling in the area that didn't have broken windows. He also said that it was a farming, sort of a farming area, that one that is caught between the Afghan government forces and ISIS and Al-Qaeda on the other side. And these people are stuck right in the middle. So I will not be surprised at all to hear of casualties because of the bomb radius. I want to say one more thing, and then I'll go. The cake and tomahawk moment that Trump had, it's inconceivable to me that he could not distinguish between Iraq and Syria in that moment.
Yeah.
Being interviewed, and then it just like washed right over him when she corrected him and said, "Well, you mean Syria." I don't know who that guy is in the White House. I'm not even sure that he has control. I don't think any of these guys really do, whether it was Obama or Clinton or Bush or whatever. I think it's the deep state.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm livid, and that's all I wanted to say. Thanks from Iran.
Well, you're welcome. I have one observation about this. I mean, if it's they dropped that bomb in farming country, then yeah, probably a lot of people got hurt. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we were discussing with Donna this Moab bomb dropped in Afghanistan. And it's kind of interesting because the corporate media is saying, this is all about ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And yes, there are some ISIS and Al-Qaeda up in Afghanistan, but the government's main problem is with the resurgent Taliban, who were basically in charge of Afghanistan until the most recent U.S. invasion, when they wanted to go on in and secure an inexpensive pipeline right-of-way, as well as access to Afghanistan opium, which had been eradicated under the Taliban. And so I find it interesting that they're not mentioning the resurgent Taliban, because last I heard, the installed puppet rulers of Afghanistan are only in control of about half that country. It's another quagmire. So maybe they used that bomb just as kind of a terror tactic, saying, you better stop resisting our puppet ruler or we're going to drop one of these things on you. All right, back to the phones. Peter in Dallas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'm a Trump supporter who also is disappointed with the bombing in Syria. But I've been pretty happy with him, his domestic policy. I think he's done a lot of good things. So I, myself, personally have got to decide whether or not this guy is damaged goods, or can I forgive him and we move on? Your attacks on him are pretty relentless and ruthless, and I'm just wondering, have you given up the ship? Are you saying, I'm done with the guy, I want him out? And if you're not, they're pretty effective, and you might get that anyway.
Well, I'm done with the guy because he's kept his campaign promises that weren't really a threat to anybody of significant power and influence. But the promises he broke were the ones that were most important to those of us who supported him. An end to foreign interventions, a turning away from the war agenda. We're talking about risking global war that's going to go nuclear. And yeah, I'm not a person who makes his decisions based on loyalty or friendship. Okay, I'm judging the man by his actions, moment to moment to moment to moment. And if tomorrow he comes on out and does something great, I'll applaud him for it. I've applauded him for his policy regarding NASA and immigration. He's already pulling back on a lot of his economic promises. But all of a sudden, this reversal to go forward and push this war agenda, that is a betrayal to everybody who supported him. And as I said before, when Donald Trump sent those cruise missiles into Syria, he didn't just destroy a Syrian airfield, he destroyed any chance he's going to have of a second term in office. Okay?
Well, I get it. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go now. Back to the news here. John McCain is not helping the situation between the U.S. and Russia at all. He's flapping his gums all over the place here. This entire year, everywhere he speaks, it's always Russia must be destroyed, Russia must be destroyed, Russia must be destroyed. Here's your rifle, John. I'm really sick and tired of hearing all these people out there who say we've got to go make war on Russia, but I don't see them actually getting on the plane or the boat to go there and do it. They want your kids to be killed and crippled. They want your money to be spent. John McCain wants you to go on out and murder people he doesn't like. And if I remember correctly, that was what they threw Charles Manson in prison for. So, article over in, well, actually, the link to it was broken. If nuclear war breaks out, which U.S. cities would be targeted first? It's a very important question. It is a very important question because we all know where we live, and there's a concern. Even as early as this weekend, we could see nukes in use over in North Korea. And because of the display of knee-jerk, reckless actions by the administration, everybody who's got nuclear weapons, they've got their fingers hovering over the button because they don't know what to expect. They're dealing with a nuclear-armed nation that is attacking other countries on the basis of fairy tales and wishful thinking. Now, Google is reporting that searches for World War III have hit an all-time high. I am hardly surprised about that. I linked to a website called Nuke Map, and it is a web page where you can put in a location, probably your home, or probably a nearby likely target, and you can put in the yield of the nuclear weapon, and it will display the nuclear weapon effects. And you can select ground burst, air burst, so forth and so on. And obviously, in my case, I selected Pearl Harbor, which is right out that window. And the only good news I got from this is that North Korea's largest nuclear weapon that they've tested so far, if it was dropped on Pearl Harbor, it would rattle our windows and that would be about it. But every currently used Chinese and Russian nuke, if one of them hits Pearl Harbor, we're going to be gone. And the Republic Broadcasting System will play polka music in this time slot. It's now a reality. And I did put up that other article about the trinitite. And what trinitite is, I have a very small piece of it. It's a bit of desert sand that was underneath the explosion of the world's first nuclear bomb, Project Trinity, hence the name trinitite. And it's in my world-famous debris collection. And here's the point we need to be making as we talk to everybody. The U.S. is out there invading other countries, attacking other countries because we think they have nuclear weapons, or maybe they might want to get nuclear weapons, or they're all dangerous, wacko crazies. And you need to remind everybody that right now, only the United States has actually used nuclear weapons against another country. And the United States soaked my parents' generation for something like $5 trillion back at a time when $1 trillion was really a lot of money to build our nuclear deterrent. The missile silos all over the Midwest, the B-52s, the cruise missiles, the ballistic missile submarines, and we were told all this expense was needed to deter an attack. That the reason nobody was trying to invade us is we had the nuclear weapons. Well, doesn't common sense tell you that's the reason these other countries have nuclear weapons? Even if Saddam Hussein had had a nuclear weapon, what was he going to do with it? Put it on display in a museum? March it down the street in a military parade and say, look how butch I am? He was never going to use it against either the United States or Israel because the United States and Israel have nuclear weapons and would reduce Iraq to a giant piece of that green glass I was talking about. The same thing applies to Iran. If Iran ever does develop a nuclear weapon, they are not going to strike first at the U.S. or Israel. What they want the weapon for is to deter an invasion. And with the United States and Israel constantly invading other countries, common sense says you need something to prevent them from crossing across your border. The U.S. has been talking about invading North Korea for years under various pretexts. Now they've settled on the fact that North Korea actually dared to build a deterrent weapon. And especially now, with the behavior we are seeing coming from this White House, every nation that has got nuclear weapons is going to be hanging on to them that much harder. Every nation that does not have nuclear weapons is going to be looking at some way to get them. Either they're going to mount their own development program or they're going to try and buy one on the black market from Israel, the way South Africa tried to do. So it's legitimate to be talking about nuclear war as a reality. Not that silly Bert the Turtle cartoon. Maybe hunt down the film Atomic Cafe. That's a good one. I'm going to see if I can find that online during the next commercial break here. All right. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, I just want to comment about two things quick. The bomb in Afghanistan on Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Now, that is a landlocked country, and the terrain is treacherous, to say the least. I was just wondering how they're getting around over there without being seen. And how are all these other countries getting nuclear weapons when they don't speak English, they can't read algebra, and their writing is pictorial? Like, who gave China the user manual and converted it into Chinese? They were on bicycles 45 years ago. I mean, do they really have nukes? Is this propaganda for the world?
Wait a minute.
Pakistan?
We're talking about which country? North Korea?
Any of these countries that were on bicycles 40 years ago all seem to have nukes. I mean, Russia didn't have nukes until the Rosenbergs gave them the formula. I mean, so how do these countries that have pictorial alphabets, they can't even read algebra, they can't read English, who gave them the user manual, the instruction manual to make a nuclear bomb? I mean, these people were on bicycles 40 and 50 years ago.
Well,
the Russians couldn't build one until the Rosenbergs gave them the formula.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the technology on how to build a nuclear bomb is actually out there in the public domain now. But that's not really the issue. It's acquiring the fissionable materials. Because your basic uranium fission bomb, it's just a tube. And there are 2 chunks of uranium at each end below the critical mass. They get shoved together to create the critical mass. It goes bang. You are now all in possession of the secret of how to build a fission uranium bomb. The hard part is getting that refined uranium.
You have to convert it. You have to convert it in a super collider or something like that.
No, you refine it in centrifuge.
Hey,
Rick, my turn, my radio show. Okay, you have to enrich the uranium by refining it in centrifuges. Yes, it's a very complex technology, but every country, no matter how poor their common people are, the military has got money to work with. They can hire experts. They can send students to other countries to learn technology in the universities. But again, we need to remember that when the former government of South Africa collapsed, documents surfaced showing that at the time of the collapse, the former government of South Africa and Israel were in discussions for South Africa to buy a nuclear weapon from Israel. And there was one nuclear event called the Vela Incident, which was a nuclear test detonation in the South Atlantic that nobody's ever officially taken credit for, but it was thought to have been a joint Israel-South African nuclear test. What's really interesting is apparently following North Korea's first nuclear test, reconnaissance aircraft flew over and grabbed some of the fallout, and apparently it was an isotopic match for samples collected after the Vela incident. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that North Korea has not, in fact, developed their own nuclear weapons, but they've bought a few from Israel, and they're building on that technology. And that is really the danger. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty was supposed to control the spread of nuclear weapons, but Israel is using it to guarantee themselves a market monopoly.
Okay, well, it's okay. My life experience tells me, and my attitude is, I think these people that they're telling us have nukes, they really don't have them. That's my opinion and my life experience. It's a little more complicated than all these third world countries showing up with nukes. So, okay, you explained it pretty good for me. Thank you.
All right, and we're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike.
Hello.
You hear me?
I hear you.
Hi. Okay. Very good. I think it is completely inappropriate for Republic to play polka music in their time slot. Did they speak Good Morning Vietnam? I thought Adrian Cronauer fixed this.
Okay. All right.
It just doesn't work. Market share is going to be sufficiently threatened under the circumstances as it is. You know what I mean? In a time of crisis, you need to be really having popular stuff on.
I don't know. I think we could enlarge our market up there in North Dakota.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. If you have pretty good population density and a high demographic, I guess you're good.
And if we go to nuclear war, they may be the only state left.
Okay. You got to go where the market is.
All right.
All right. I guess. But I was going to say I'm hoping with this North Korea thing that this is going to ultimately end up being just saber rattling there. Obviously it's built to that. So for me, there's this huge qualitative difference between the notion of continuing operations or expanding them to balkanize Syria versus North Korea. North Korea, just in my psyche, feels like a totally different trip trigger that takes things to a whole nother plateau.
Okay, Glenn, okay, we all have to be cautious about what we think is actually going on in North Korea, because everything we think we know about North Korea has come to us via the same corporate media that insisted Saddam had nuclear weapons, that Ahmadinejad wanted to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. We cannot, ignore the possibility that Kim Jong-un is actually a really cool guy. He's just being lied about to justify an invasion.
Oh, yeah, okay, right. But okay, well, either way, I'm thinking that it's probably wise to leave them alone and let them stew in their own juices. I really don't think it's absolutely necessary to go in and start up a hornet's nest with him. Frankly, part of me would just hope for a military coup, and one of these older, stodgy generals would just go up and put one right between his eyes, or have a military coup or something like that. Maybe the dynastic succession thing isn't working out so well for him. You know?
Well, my attitude is that's the North Koreans' problems to solve, and we've got so many problems here at home. Our government doesn't really have any business sticking its nose into any other country's business. And moreover than that, we can hardly be held up as any kind of an ideal society for anybody else to emulate when you look at all the corruption, the election fraud, the absolute fascist pandering to corporate interests by forcing us to buy things we don't want, like vaccines and GMO. We're not a model society. And that's why I loved that speech in the premiere episode of HBO's The Network. We're not the greatest nation on earth anymore. We used to be, but we're not, and we'd better start dealing with that right now.
Right, I totally agree. I actually, part of me wonders if they have an urgency to get something going before this debt ceiling drop dead date, the debt ceiling vote, or the economic indicators. From what I'm hearing, listening to the various economists, and they seem to say that third quarter this year, June, is when the economic stuff's really going to hit the fan, and they may well want their war as a distraction before all that really starts in earnest. But anyway, thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. If they can actually get a state of war going, then there's no more debt ceiling. That's why bankers love the wars. They love the world wars because all the governments say, okay, there's no debt ceiling, we're just going to borrow like crazy. And that enslaves their people to the bankers for the next 100 years, and that is the scam behind it all. Okay, I just located a copy of the Atomic Cafe, and on this next commercial break, I'm going to go ahead and post it to whatreallyhappened.com. You need to watch this. When it first came out, it was actually banned in the United States. It took a major court case on First Amendment grounds for this documentary to be shown in the United States of America, and that tells you that you should watch it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And unfortunately, the link to the Atomic Cafe I found turned out to be a pay-per-view. So I'm going to see if it's available anywhere for free. It was released back in 1983. And apparently it's been recopyrighted, and if you want to see it, you can hunt it down, you can pay for it. I'd like to find a free one, but it is worth watching. And our control room was saying there are other films like Boy and His Dog and The Hills Have Eyes. Well, those are fictional, and they're dramatizations. The Atomic Cafe is actually built up of real documentary footage from the development and testing of America's nuclear arsenal and what it really does to people and structures on the ground. Now, the last Indiana Jones film, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that whole opening about the atomic bomb test, that stuff really went on. The government would go out to the nuclear test site, they'd build a town, and they would have all the stuff in there, and then they'd literally set off the bomb to see what was going to happen. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. John in Chicago, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Regarding the 21,000-pound bomb, the movie that came to my mind was Spies Like Us with Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd. You remember that movie?
I remember that one.
Yeah, I think everybody should watch that and then go to the part where the general gives the speech. Remember, because the base of the movie was that our two goofs were sent over there to launch an ICBM against the United States so they could shoot it down from space with a laser.
Yep.
And then what did the general say? A weapon unused is a useless weapon?
Yes.
When I saw that big orange thing, that's exactly the movie line that came to mind. That this is all about increasing arms sales again. This stuff's all sitting around, nobody's using it. The small munitions stuff sold in the Middle East, that doesn't make a whole lot of money.
Well, as a matter of fact, you're absolutely right, because after the fall of the Soviet Union, everyone kept saying, we don't need to spend as much money on defense. We've got huge stockpiles of weapons. We've got these tanks. We've got the nuclear deterrent. We don't need to keep this big military-industrial complex going. So, of course, one of the purposes of having a war is to use up all the weapons and supplies so they can turn around to the taxpayers and say, we need more weapons and supplies. It's your duty as a patriotic citizen to live more austere, poverty-stricken lives so that we can have all the weapons that we need. And, yeah, the Vietnam was a classic example of that. They're going on out and bombing empty fields just to use up the bombs.
Right. The other thing is, did you know Mike Pence is coming to your backyard in about 10 days?
Oh, swell. That'll wreck all the traffic.
He's doing an Asian trip, and then he's going to end it at Pearl Harbor. So if you and Claire... I mean, there's probably going to be some protesters out there, but if you want to express your sore displeasure at that guy, you'll get to do it. He'll be there in Pearl Harbor at the end of his trip.
Well, I imagine he'll be under heavy security, and I don't. Maybe not. What point would there be in it? They're not listening to us anymore.
Well, go meet some protesters face to face.
All right, I'll do that. All right, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. One of our readers found a free copy of Atomic Cafe and posted it to whatreallyhappened.com. I've got about 6 emails who are sending in versions. Apparently, you can watch it over at Vimeo. And, yeah, that's your homework for tonight. Watch that documentary. There's going to be a quiz on it sometime in class next week here. So a lot of people, like myself, are very concerned that the United States is really not in a position to fight and win a new major war. Now, the conventional propagandistic wisdom is America has never lost a war, not counting that Vietnam thing. But the reality is we have not actually won a major war in 70 years. And contrary to what you will see in TV shows and movies, we didn't win World War I and World War II all by our lonesomes. In fact, in both cases, we were kind of late showing up. The government waited until they saw which side was going to win, and then they hopped on board. Remember, in World War II, Italy started on one side, realized they were losing, killed their leaders, and joined the other side. So I'm looking at this article. This is out of Washington's blog. Beware the dogs of war. Is the American empire on the verge of collapse? And it starts with a wonderful quote from James Madison. Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies. From these proceed debts and taxes, known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. That was James Madison. Look over the last 100 years of U.S. history. I'll save you time. Count the number of years we are not at war with somebody. Now, last night there was another major attack on Syria. Israel apparently flew in and dropped a bunch of bombs around Damascus. They're thumbing their nose at the Russian air defenses, saying, we were incredibly clever. We flew in through Lebanon and we were able to evade you. My read of the situation is that Russia held back from interfering out of a desire not to escalate the conflict with the United States, especially after all that yapping from McCain about how Russia must be destroyed. But Israel is a fool if they're going to rely on that for more attacks. Now, apparently Israel wasn't the only one who was out there pounding on Syria, and there's been a major, major whoopsie that is still not being reported on the corporate media. They're still going on about the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan. We gave them what for? Maybe that's why they did it. Distract from the story of this disaster down in Syria, because apparently coalition aircraft hit an ISIS chemical weapons depot. And the resulting cloud of toxic vapors have killed several hundred people. And this does prove that dropping bombs on chemical weapons depots is a bad idea, which undermines the second excuse that the U.S. had for attacking the Syria airfields. Oh, they had chemical weapons there we had to destroy. And then they showed a picture of a bunch of canisters saying, we blew these up. These were chemical weapons. Nobody around there was wearing decontamination gear, and it turned out those canisters actually held cluster bomb parts. Yet another lie. How do we know when the government's lying? Their mouths move and words come out. It also confirms, yet again, that the only chemical weapons inside Syria are those in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And where did they get them? Well, they got some of them from the United States of America. It's the same place Saddam Hussein got the poison gas he used on the Iranians. Several hundred civilians. And so far, not a word of it on the corporate media. They're just applauding the mother of all bombs. Look how butch we are. I think those guys are using this giant bomb to compensate for other insecurities. We're going to take a phone call here. Tom in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Long-time watcher. I would like to pull Donald out from under the bus for a while. I have a couple of points. I could jump across them pretty quickly, I think. Just a week ago, everybody was saying, he can't get his people in there. They're just going to bury him. What's he going to do? Nobody had any ideas. So suddenly we see this launch. Now, I looked at the BDA, and I know what the accuracy of our GPS military systems are. Mm-hmm. And they can hit something within about a meter. And if you look at where those missiles landed, there's a big long row, the whole length of the runway, about 200 meters past the runway. Now, even the civilian 6-digit GPS will get you within 10 meters, So there's something way wrong with that.
Well, it's entirely possible that Russia has shared with Syria some of their electronic countermeasures. We know that they're very, very potent from what happened to the USS Donald Cook.
Possibly, but that's kind of reaching.
I don't think so.
That's just one point. Well, maybe not. Maybe you're right, but let me go to the next point. All right, so he warned them, didn't he? Like an hour ahead of time was coming? And everybody left, apparently, because the original report was there was 4 to 6 people.
Well,
so
no, you
didn't leave.
No, you don't. No, what you have here is the U.S. government did not inform Moscow of the coming attack. There was supposedly a message sent through that phone line where they're supposed to coordinate with each other, where the U.S. told Russia, don't have any of your planes around this airfield. And that was about the extent of the warning. But at least 9 people were killed, 6 of them civilians. And apparently at least one of them was Russian personnel.
Okay, well, it's $65 million at the very least in missiles.
80.
Not very effective.
It's $80 million. They go for $1.5 million a pop.
Yeah, all right. Well, I thought they were 1.1. But anyway, the point is, the thing is, he launched these missiles, and as far as I'm concerned, they did absolutely minimal damage. It looked to me like they intentionally missed everything, except the hardened bunkers that they knew they wouldn't go through. Yet there were at least 5 Nagoyan MiG-21s sitting out there, right out in the open, that they could have hit. There was a big string of Mi-24
Excuse me, Tom, I'm going to have to cut you off here because you need to go back and check your facts. First of all, there were 6 MiG-23s, and they were all destroyed. But those were antiques from the Vietnam era. And so basically Trump spent $80 million in Tomahawk cruise missiles to kill $4.5 million worth of antique aircraft. We're going to switch over to Milton in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Milton. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, it seems to me that everybody's waiting for like a great savior in Washington, D.C., and I think it's beyond hope that we're going to get a leader and leaders in Washington to do what the people want. And if I had it in my power, I would have 2, 3, 4 million people march on Washington, D.C. and say, clear out of the house.
It could well happen. It could well happen. Remember, we literally did have 1 million people march into D.C. to end the war in Vietnam. President Lyndon Johnson, in his memoirs, wrote that when he looked out the White House and he saw that crowd on the mall, that was the moment he realized they'd lost the war in Vietnam. And right now we have a country that is very angry at what is going on. We could easily see 4 million people descend on Washington, D.C. and just stand there and say, you stop this nonsense right now.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I'll let you go on this question here. It's like somebody knows I went out shopping. They come and invade my home and rob me. What's protecting our country with all our women and men and all over there in seas fighting these wars? If we're hit, well, what's protecting us?
Well, we don't really have much protection. What we have is revenge, and that's that nuclear deterrent thing. Now, there are you've got the Air National Guards, you've got the naval forces. I mean, 100% of our military forces are not outside the country. It's, split between the defensive forces and the offensive forces. But the fact of the matter is, this Moab bomb may be a bit of a bluster because our forces are overextended, our stockpiles are drawn down, our older weapons are just worn out, and the new replacements are overpriced junk. And the United States government may actually be just out there committing these acts of atrocity to try and scare the rest of the world into thinking we're this incredible monster, and the reality is that we're a paper tiger. And that could very well be the case. Okay.
We're coming out insane in everybody's mind.
Okay.
All right, Michael, I'll let you go. I just wondered that.
Okay, well, Milton, we're going to let you go. Thanks an awful lot. I want to get back to this. I had somebody who wrote in regarding that caller who was talking about all these other countries and they can't read and write algebra. How the heck did they get nuclear weapons? And he raises a point I thought about at the time and didn't say, but since other people apparently noticed it, I need to get back to it. These countries, this caller we're talking about, these Middle Eastern countries, who do you think invented algebra? So, little point here. Please don't call into the show if you don't actually have your facts straight. It just wastes everybody's time, and it annoys the hamster. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliate who's just now rejoining the network. Interestingly enough, Trump won't say if he signed off on this Moab strike. And personally, he's just saying we have given the military total authorization, which if I'm reading that correct, Trump has kicked on back and told the military, you do whatever the heck you want to do. And, of course, the military is going to go out and behave like a military, which is to put large holes in other people's property and bodies. And, again, every time they drop one of these huge bombs, they have to replace it. $66 million, I think, one of these things costs. They love the money. Another article coming on out here, this is from VoltaireNet, and it's making the observation that it looks like Italy might be the launching pad for the coming U.S. invasion of Syria. And it's basically chastising not just the United States of America, but all of NATO, just unanimous, ready to violate international law and commit mass murder, all wrapped in pretty flags. And they're all justifying it on the basis of absolutely, totally made-up nonsense, which is exactly how Adolf Hitler started World War II. First of all, with the Reichstag fire, which allowed him to grab much more power and personal authority, the way Erdogan is likely to do this weekend. And then the Gleiwitz affair, faking a terror attack on their own territory, blaming Poland for it, and marching them on off there. All right, let's see. Another phone call. Greg in Washington, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Well, since you're talking about nuclear weapons, I've read over the last year or so about different instances of tactical nukes being used in Yemen, Ukraine, Turkey, with analysis by people, analyzing the flares. Well, anyway, what do you think?
Well, I'd want to see the raw data on that. When the Moab was first developed, and I looked at how heavy it was, and I even raised the possibility that it was a propaganda device, to conceal the use of small tactical nuclear weapons by saying, no, it wasn't a tactical nuke. We've got this really big bomb on the trailer, and that's what we used. And maybe that's what was used in Afghanistan, which is why the corporate media is doing nothing but showing footage from a 2003 test. Now, as far as determining if there's a nuclear detonation, what you need is a trace of the luminance pulse, because there's a very unique double flash signature to nuclear weapons. Because whereas chemical explosives, conventional explosives, will turn their own chemicals into an expanding cloud of high-pressure gas, a nuclear weapon does what it does by simply releasing a huge amount of energy, which heats the surrounding materials and causes them to expand. And what you will have is you will have the initial intense burst of energy coming out of the bomb, and it will literally burn the air around the detonation black. And then the blackened air will absorb more energy and start expanding outward rapidly. And so that very first instant of the detonation of a nuclear weapon, there's a double pulse in the light. And that's how you identify that you're looking at a nuclear weapon. Plus, in the aftermath, you go on in and you take radiation meters and you look for the various signature isotopes.
You know, what you're saying sounds similar to the analysis of what I read online about the bomb in Ankara during the supposed coup last summer. Anyway, you know, and then I read today that the United States has some 600 micro nukes.
Well, I'm not sure where you're reading this, because there has to be a minimum amount of fissionable material in a uranium bomb. What it's called critical mass. And if you're below that, you can get it to heat up. You cannot get it to sustain a chain reaction and actually explode with any kind of force. And even the hydrogen bombs and all those other multi-stage weapons in the plutonium bombs, they all have they have to have a minimum size. And I've always heard this story about a micro nuke that could destroy a building. Well, that's an awful lot of money to spend on a munition that only takes out one building. Now, when they talk about the so-called suitcase nuke, what they're really usually talking about is somebody has acquired a multi-stage weapon, and they're taking that uranium trigger out and using it as a standalone weapon. And those are actually pretty small. They're not pocket size, and they wouldn't even really fit in a briefcase. But a large satchel or a large shipping container could definitely hold one.
Well, I just wonder. I think, naturally we're not getting the truth through our media, of course.
No, we're getting a lot of noise and everything. And, everyone's talking about nuclear missiles and everything. If somebody really wanted to carry out a nuclear terror attack on the United States of America, it is unfortunately alarmingly easy, and TSA grabbing our crotches isn't going to stop it. And I'm not going to share that on air now that I think about it. But but again, no country with nuclear weapons, whether it's Iran, Iraq, or North Korea, or anybody, or even South Africa, they are not going to launch an unprovoked nuclear attack anywhere on the United States of America or Israel, because it amounts to national suicide in the retaliation.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. At least it keeps little countries from being invaded, like Korea.
That's why they want these bombs. They're not building these bombs to be aggressive. They're building these bombs to be left alone. Okay? The North Korea wants nuclear weapons so it can make the cost of invading North Korea exceed the profit. That's all it is.
Yeah. You're preaching to the choir, Mike. I'm in your choir.
No, that's my wife's job.
Everything you say. Well, yes, I don't sing very well. Well, hey, Mike, good talking to you. I've been going to call you for years and finally decided to. Anyway, keep up the good work. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open. Okay, another little article here. This one's out of Sirlin News, or Sirlin News. Basically, it's saying the U.S. is getting ready to invade Syria to establish buffer zones. And we know that's nonsense. They're getting the idea of a buffer zone from Israel's tactics against Palestine, where they will commandeer land for an emergency buffer zone, then they'll build on it, Then they'll say, well, we need a new buffer zone, and they'll grab some more land, and then they'll build on that and say, well, we need another buffer zone, and they keep just chewing away at Palestine over the time. What's going on in Syria is a plan that has been worked on for decades, and it certainly serves Israel's purpose. It's to carve a new independent Kurdistan out of parts of Syria, Turkey, and Iran, or rather Iraq. And that's what this is really about, because Israel's ultimate aim is for the Middle East map to be redrawn into lots and lots of little tiny countries that can be bullied and pushed around by Israel and its nuclear arsenal. And that's what's going on here. Now, we're going to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, more about the buffer zones and more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about this plan to establish what are being called buffer zones, but are in actuality the beginnings of carving out a new Kurdistan from Syria, Turkey, and Iraq. And again, the goal is to redraw the map of the Middle East. And if you look at the history of the Middle East, you'll see how much of that has always been drawn from outside. These aren't people who are setting up their own countries. The great powers come on in and they'll say, all right, here's the Middle East. We're going to draw a line here, and here, and here, and here. And this is this country, and this is that country, to keep them small and fragmentary and easy to control, because there's all that oil down there. We don't want them deciding for themselves what they're going to sell it for, which sort of fell apart when OPEC was created. Now, last night when I was watching TV and I was flipping through the channels, and I went past the 700 Club. And that's normally not something I would watch. But just as I was going past it, I heard Pat Robertson use the word Kurdistan. And so I stayed there. And he's basically out there using God and the Bible and everything to say that, oh, it's time for Kurdistan. There used to be a Kurdistan. We need to bring it on back here. Well, there used to be a Nazi Germany. I'm not ready to bring them back. But Pat was out there selling to his audience, yes, there has to be a Kurdistan here. And the first thing that goes through my mind is, Pat, whatever happened to thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property, not to mention thou shalt not steal and thou shalt not kill? We're going to go back to the phones here. Steve in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? I'm just, watching everything that's going on, and it's like you're seeing all these mainstream outlets, and we saw the strike on Syria, and now they've announced it everywhere that the vessel's on its way to North Korea.
Yes.
And then we see this strike today with this mother of all bombs, and then they also, I seen an announcement, the SEAL team that took out Osama bin Laden is on its way also. So it's like all this stuff. I mean, if you're Kim over there, you're watching this, and I mean, this totally goes against this unpredictability that Trump always talked about on his campaign trail. And what it looks to me like they're going to do is, knowing that this April 15th is their celebration where they usually test missiles, they're probably going to use that as an opportunity to say, oh, he aimed it at Japan or he aimed it at one of our vessels, even if he doesn't. And
there's going to be a false flag of some kind. There's going to be a false flag of some kind. Now, again, I want to caution anybody about talking about North Korea's reckless leader, because everything we think we know about North Korea and its government has been told to us by the same corporate media and government that told us Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons, that Ahmadinejad wanted to wipe Israel off the map, and so forth and so on. We cannot trust any of it. All we can trust is our events we're actually seeing, which is the U.S. invading, drone-striking, regime-changing countries all over the planet right now. And again, any leader who is looking at the behavior of the U.S. government and ignoring what they say is going to be working on building up their defenses and creating a deterrent to being invaded. Now, I agree with you. I agree with you. The North Korea situation could get wildly out of control. Apparently, the Carl Vinson battle group, or Trump's armada, will be in position on Saturday.
And that's the day, right?
Well, that's the day they're on position.
Testing their weapons.
That's the day they're in position. I would assume something is going to happen very, very soon thereafter. But there will be a false flag of some kind. Either the U.S. will set off a nuke someplace and say, look what North Korea was trying to hit Japan or Hawaii and they missed, you know, but conveniently it was close enough where people got lots and lots of pictures of the mushroom cloud, or some such nonsense. There's even talk about how Kim Jong-un is going to loft one of his nuclear weapons into the skies over the U.S. and black out the power grid. I mean, they're just trying everything out there to make it look like we are in such danger. And it's an exact repeat of how Adolf Hitler got his people hot and bothered to invade Poland, you know, with the attack on the Gleiwitz radio station. Or the same thing during the war in Iraq. Saddam has nukes. Tony Blair was telling the people of Great Britain that Saddam was going to attack with biological weapons with only 45 minutes' notice. How many times do you have to be lied to before you understand you are being lied to about everything? Steve, got to let you go. Taking a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to do a couple of news stories before we go back to the phone lines here. Now, as you know, the United States launched 59 missiles at that Syrian air base, of which only 23 actually hit the air base. And as that other caller pointed out, most of them just seem to hit open ground. And either the quality of our Tomahawks matches the quality of the F-22 and the F-35, or Russia has shared their electronic jamming technology with the Syrians, and they were able to GPS spoof those Tomahawks someplace else. Remember that Iran managed to capture a U.S. drone by spoofing its GPS location, and the drone thought it was landing back at its base, and it was actually landing in Iran, and they got hold of it, and now they've copied it, and they have their own domestically produced drones now based on that technology. Now, we know that some of those cruise missiles that missed the airfield hit 3 nearby villages, killing more civilians, more children. Russia is claiming that they shot down most of the rest. And apparently, Russia is already replacing the aircraft that were destroyed on that Syrian air base. And no, they're not getting new MiG-23s. They're getting much more modern, up-to-date, much more capable aircraft as replacements. All right, let's take some phone calls. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'm just wondering, you think Russia's going to allow us to invade Syria, or do you think they're going to draw their own red line? I understand they already did kind of draw their own red line. I just can't think, even if Putin wants to let them do it, he's got hardliners back there like this guy Sharanovsky.
Yes.
I don't think Sharanovsky's going to allow it, you know?
Yeah, Putin, there's going to come a point where Putin is going to have to stand firm or risk being removed from power by his own government. And that is why we are in such a perilous situation. Just like the United States has hardliners like Lindsey Graham and John McCain, the Russian republics have theirs as well. Of course, for these people, it's all theoretical. It's all fun and games. They're not going to be on the front lines. Their children are not going to be on the front lines. And so,
we'll all be on the front.
Say again?
Well, Mike, we're all going to be in the front lines because it's going to go. You know, it's going to go nuclear because what's going to happen is the Russians are going to defeat the NATO forces, the Israeli forces, whoever else in that area. They're an excellent army. They're motivated. And what would happen then is probably, especially since I think Trump isn't all there, kind of almost like McCain. I'm getting the feeling now he's nuts himself, and they'll stop launching the nukes, and that's it. Goodbye.
Well, you know? I don't know if Donald Trump is nuts or if he's just being controlled. The important thing is the public image going out to the rest of the world is the U.S. government is nuts. They're reckless, they're impulsive, they're willing to fling weapons in all directions without regard to the consequences, based on fictions and wishful thinking and make-believe. That somehow the fact that other countries are building nuclear weapons to prevent us from invading them justifies immediate invasion. And that that's making the whole world very, very dangerous. Anyway, Steve, I need to let you...
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, Steve, well, it sounds like the dogs have calmed down, so do you have one more thing?
Yeah, I think that bomb, by the way, that they dropped today, this is trying to scare other people, but they understand is everything I understand is Russia has just this kind of bomb even be more powerful. So I mean, you know, it was done basically for show, and God knows how many innocent people might have been killed. by that thing.
I absolutely agree. Given that they're not showing the actual strike in Afghanistan, and they're still pounding it here, the biggest non-nuclear bomb, the biggest non-nuclear bomb. And I'm almost wondering, did they use a nuke, and they're trying to say this is what they used, and they show that 2003 footage. Because whatever country actually uses nuclear weapons first is definitely going to lose in the court of public opinion around the entire world. I don't know what the purpose of this was. In fact, again, they may have dropped this on Afghanistan in farming country just so the media had something to report that was not the coalition strike into Syria last night that killed several hundred innocent civilians by hitting an ISIS chemical weapons factory. Again, think Bill Clinton's cruise missiles into Sudan when Monica Lewinsky testified, or the invasion of Grenada 24 hours after the Beirut bombing. These things get done all the time. This could be more of the same.
Yeah, because there's no way I believe that chemical attack was nothing but either a false flag or, like you said, they might have hit a weapons factory. But where did they get those weapons from? Now, we know that the CIA has been smuggling weapons into Syria from through Turkey and probably coming from Libya.
We have the paper trail. We have the paper trail. They were coming from the United States of America. In fact, WikiLeaks just put out another Hillary Clinton State Department email in which she's saying that Al-Qaeda in Syria is on our side.
By the way, did you hear that? On my way home, I heard that fool who's the head of the CIA now, I think it's Pompeo, basically insulting Assange and insulting two patriots, Assange and Snowden. I mean, it's getting me. This is getting me disgusted. I almost long for Obama. I mean, that's how bad it's getting.
Well, I'm not at that point yet. What I'm longing for is an asteroid to hit Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv. That's what I'm longing for. And I would miss getting a chance to see all those great museums, but I'm willing to make the sacrifice. Okay, Mark, we're going to let you go. We got a bunch of calls here. Werner in New Brunswick, aloha, what is on your mind?
Oh, Michael, I was listening there for the last hour, and you have to get yourself another bad boy you can blame for past history. I was being brought up in Germany where the media was being controlled by the Allied forces with the same BS. But now the original archives are available about the timeline of the events and so on. And since you mentioned that Zena Gleiwitz, that we were being told in the old country that it was a false flag. But what I've been finding out, it was through torture extracted at the Nuremberg trials, where they tortured the witnesses so that they would tell whatever the interrogators wanted to hear.
Yes.
And in the foreplay of the Second World War, you people in North America, and you, especially you in Hawaii, you probably did not know how many thousand German civilians who were living in the territories that, at the Versailles Treaty, were being taken away from Germany. How many thousands of those civilians were brutally tortured and killed. Their farms were being torched and everything else. And Hitler had appealed to the League of Nations to send troops there to protect the population. In Poland, that in the German territories in Poland and in Czechoslovakia, the Datenland.
Okay, Werner, no, I actually know all of this, and I know that Hitler was forced to do what he did because the League of Nations abandoned its responsibility. And yes, Poland was doing a lot of terrible things. But the point is, we're talking about how false flags are used to manipulate public opinion. And Werner, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to switch over to Dan in Texas. Dan, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, myself, from the get-go, going back into last summer, I never believed that Trump wasn't controlled by whoever you want to call them, the globalists or Goldman Sachs. And from the get-go, from the appointment of particular persons to his cabinet, full of Goldman Sachs types.
Yeah, I know.
And so I never believed it to begin with. And the one thing I wanted to say is I very rarely ever catch in on Alex Jones, but I just was curious, so at 11 o'clock today I tuned it up. And boy, what a major contortionist he has become for justifying Donald Trump.
You know, I have gotten so much email about that where people are just saying they're as disappointed in Alex Jones as they are in Donald Trump. And I've gotten a lot of email that is praising me for saying, yeah, I'm not in love with the guy anymore. I'm hearing a lot of noises from the other room. Hang on a second. Do we have a new family member? Claire, do we have a new family member? I think so. We're expecting a new family member, and from the noises I'm hearing over there, I think it just arrived. So we'll update.
You mean like a child?
Yeah, from one of our nieces.
How about that?
Yeah.
Well,
little bright spot of happiness in all this. Little bright spot of happiness in all this dark world of gloom and danger and everything, and so we'll be updating on that one. Anyway, listen, Dan, got to let you go here, and we got a lot of news that we need to get through, especially with all this nonsense about Korea. Now, Putin is vowing that he will prevent color revolutions, not just in Russia, but all of its allies. And, of course, we have come to understand that the phrase color revolution means a covert overthrow from outside by Western interests primarily centered on George Soros and his non-governmental organizations. Russia's already banned them all. They've kicked them out of Russia. They caught them trying to stir up trouble, the same way that they've been stirring up trouble here in the United States of America, destabilization campaign, and the same way they were doing it all over Europe, all over Ukraine. Other countries are starting to crack down, like Hungary, and we even have this spectacle of the European Union going into Hungary and demanding the people of Hungary oppose their own government's efforts to prevent a coup d'etat. I mean, that's how bizarre this whole thing has really become. So, good for Putin on that one. All right, so let's talk about North Korea, because this is giving us all nightmares out here in Hawaii. It is being reported by places like CNBC that North Korea could conduct its 6th nuclear test as early as Saturday. Everything seems to be coming on down there. They're saying it's poised to go ahead. And what's really interesting is this quote from CNBC. North Korea may undertake more nuclear activity as early as Saturday in response to Washington's talk of preemptive strikes on the rogue nation and the strategic deployment of a U.S. aircraft carrier. Folks, North Korea is not the rogue nation. The United States is. Look at its behavior and actions. Don't listen to the propaganda. North Korea isn't the country that's been going out, sticking its nose into other people's countries and trying to change the government, which is exactly what they're trying to do in North Korea. The U.S. attitude toward North Korea is, how dare you build a weapon to stop us from invading your country? We're going to invade. And by the way, I'm noticing that on all of this anti-Russia, anti-North Korea, anti-Syria, anti-Afghanistan propaganda, the corporate media is now disabling all commenting. Apparently, too many people were getting on board and saying, this is just utter nonsense. Now, Beijing, despite the fortifying of its border with North Korea, and its warning that if North Korea crosses that border, that China will launch attacks, Beijing is still warning the United States against an attack on North Korea, saying it will be riskier than the attack on Syria. And China is saying that Washington needs to accept the reality that it does not have the power and means to organize global affairs, to stable them down. Everything that they're doing is making the world more chaotic and more dangerous here. Japan is making preparations to evacuate their citizens from South Korea over the rising fear of war, under the expectation that if anything goes into North Korea, North Korea is going to retaliate, at least in part, with an attack on South Korea. And what we've got is the irresistible force against the immovable object. Donald Trump and his armada, Kim Jong-un and his nuclear weapons. Neither one appear ready to back down. And apparently North Korea is expecting that there will be an attack. And we are getting reports from Pravda that Kim Jong-un has ordered the evacuation of his capital city, Pyongyang. Now, North Korea, because of all this talk of invasion and war for decade after decade after decade, and the fact that the First Korean War, which is another war the United States did not win, I might add, never officially ended. They've always been technically, legally at a state of war. And so North Korea has built an amazing complex of bomb shelters under their cities. Now, they are not large enough to accommodate the current populations, and so apparently the rules are that only people who do not have a criminal record are going to be allowed into the bomb shelters. Which, as criteria go, seems relatively practical here. Now, the reason Kim Jong-un is doing this, we've all been told about the Carl Vinson and its aircraft and the guided missile destroyers and the other fleet auxiliaries. But apparently the latest report we're getting is that the United States has deployed a cruise missile submarine to join the fleet. And what that is, following strategic arms reduction treaties, the United States government had 4 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines that were no longer allowed to carry Trident nuclear missiles. And these are the biggest nuclear ballistic missile submarines that we have. And they have 24 launch tubes. And so what the Navy did is they took these 4 submarines and the Trident missiles obviously were taken out. And into each of the Trident launch tubes, they put a rack that can hold 7 Tomahawks. Now, 2 of the Ohio tubes were used for other purposes, cutting the number down to 22. But this means each one of these 4 submarines can carry 154 Tomahawk missiles, each of which can carry a nuclear weapon. And apparently one of these is being deployed off the coast of North Korea. So all the pieces are in place. All the United States needs to do is set off a nuclear bomb someplace, claim it was North Korea, and World War III will be on. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And speaking of submarines, of course, we have to raise the concern that North Korea has launched at least one of their new Sinpo-class missile submarines. Now, of course, it's nowhere near as capable as the Ohio class. It only has 2 launch tubes. But only one nuclear bomb can wreck your afternoon. And supposedly the missile it is designed to carry has a 500-mile range. And there are others apparently being constructed. But we're hearing all this hue and cry all of a sudden that the U.S. has somehow managed to lose track of many of North Korea's submarines, which, I don't know. They may be setting us up for, again, a false flag. Big bang. Oh, a North Korean submarine fired a nuke over here, and thank goodness it missed, but everybody on the beach got pretty pictures of the mushroom cloud. Something like that. I don't know. But at this point, given the world's negative reaction to Trump's actions in Syria and Afghanistan, there has to be something to just really sell the idea that North Korea deserved what is about to happen. We are hearing now, somebody just posted an article, this mother of all bombs. Apparently Russia does have a larger non-nuclear bomb. It's 4 times as powerful. And then there are the fuel-air explosives, where there's, in theory, no upper limit about that one. The size of that one, rather. Everybody's rattling around. Let's see, there was something else here I wanted to look at. Russia's expressing horror at the hundreds of civilians killed in last night's attack that bombed an ISIS chemical weapons depot, and again, not a word on the corporate media. Just a lot of, be afraid of Korea. Kimchis are coming. Oh, by the way, little update. Yes, Claire and I have a brand new grandnephew. It's over in California, so I can't do the coochie thing. But I'm a frustrated daddy, so I'm always glad to see other people getting children. Claire and I are the world's greatest uncle and aunt. We really are. All right. So, moving on forward here. Apparently, Nigerian police have managed to foil a coming terror attack on the UK and US embassies in that country that was scheduled to take place on March 25th and 26th. So, little terror here, little terror there, all over the place. Article coming out of Press TV says U.S. oligarchs have taken control of the Trump administration. This is according to E. Michael Jones. He's a political analyst here in the United States of America. He lives in Indiana. And everyone has noticed this incredible, almost instantaneous transformation of Donald Trump from somebody who wanted to restore relations with Russia and stop the U.S. interventions, and all of a sudden he's this gung-ho war hawk. And I keep making jokes about how they went over to the Westworld laboratories and they made up a pro-war Trump to replace him with. But I'm looking at that comment where, I'll tell you what, I'm going to save this until after the station break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. We're going to open up the phone lines in a little while, not quite yet, but I still have a lot of stuff to get through. Getting an update on that Moab bomb on Afghanistan. The one thing that wasn't hit were the opium poppies. They're safe, so you can relax about that one here. Now, I know over the last couple of years, I have given Ann Coulter a lot of grief over her comment that a little radiation is good for you, following Fukushima. But more and more, I'm beginning to actually like her and her points of view. And she actually came out with this comment. She was being interviewed by Joyce Kaufman on Wednesday, and Ann Coulter came on out and said, I don't care if it was Assad who used chemical weapons. I'm tired of regime change. I'm tired of war. And that, I think, in a nutshell, summarizes all of our feelings about this. We've lived with all of these wars going back to 2001. We're tired of it because there is no end in sight. There's no end in sight at all. And it's looking more and more like a global nuclear war, and that is not something any of us want to have. And she was out there saying, war is like crack for presidents. War creates instant gravitas. All of a sudden you're respectable because you're a war president. But Trump's attack on Syria was immoral. It violates every promise he ran on. It violates international law. It's destroyed his credibility both at home and abroad. And it's going to sink his presidency. He just lost his second term in office. And Ann is saying that if Trump were not being influenced by this cocoon of neocons around him, he'd be doing a much better job. Now, getting into other areas, apparently Republicans are asking the Department of Justice under William Sessions to please review the evidence against former IRS official Lois Lerner regarding the use of the IRS as a weapon of terror against Obama's political opposition. Remember when Obama was in office and Loretta Lynch was the AG. Didn't matter what they did. Hillary committed Title 18 felony violations. No prosecutions for them. But we're going to sue those global warming deniers out of existence. So they're going back to the new Department of Justice in the hope that William Sessions is going to be a little bit more amenable to looking at this issue of misuse of the IRS. Now, Judicial Watch is suing the Environmental Protection Agency over a third-party encryption app use against Trump. Apparently everyone's playing with the codes in encryption. And it's just interesting. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, WikiLeaks has just released another Hillary Clinton email regarding Syria. This was from 2012. And Hillary says right in it, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. And we know that following that, the Obama administration, through Hillary Clinton's State Department, were smuggling weapons from Libya into Syria to give to ISIS and Al-Qaeda, our declared enemies in the war on terror. And here we are now where U.S. troops are going to be fighting side by side with Al-Qaeda in Yemen. What a totally screwed up war. And I understand in the fog of war you don't always know who's really your friend and who's really your enemy, but it's almost like they're deciding the battle lines here with a dartboard. You know, who's our enemy today? I don't know. Who were we friends with yesterday? That's our enemy today. Yesterday's enemy is today's friend. Everybody's switching sides, flipping back and forth. Looking at the economic news, apparently the French stock market took a major sell-off ahead of the coming election. Everybody is very, very nervous about what's going on. And now we're hearing that Marine Le Pen's campaign headquarters has been hit with an arson attack. So tensions are running high over there. That is the sort of thing that's going to backflash. That's going to build sympathy for her. Now, apparently Donald Trump has announced he's backing off from his vow to blacklist China as a currency manipulator because, after all, currency manipulation is the job of the Federal Reserve. This may well be the quid pro quo for China to push against North Korea. This may have been part of what was discussed down at Mar-a-Lago between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping to get China to take a firmer stand against North Korea. Trade concessions, back off on the currency manipulation. Now, speaking of Trump, do you remember that whole big stink last year during the campaign when all these liberal-owned clothing stores and department stores banned Ivanka Trump's fashion line? Oh, we can't have this. We're going to just crush her by refusing to sell her brand. And there was an immediate huge backlash of customers who simply refused to go into the stores anymore. And it had nothing to do with whether they liked Ivanka Trump or Donald Trump or not. It had to do with the fact that Americans have a sense of fair play. And politics should remain in politics, and retailers should remember their job is retail. And it was seen as kind of a very unethical, immoral thing to do, and these retailers suffered for it. But apparently not Ivanka Trump herself. She's posted a 61% increase in wholesale revenues. So as much as I'm critical of Donald Trump, good for Ivanka that she's out there being successful. Because Ivanka Trump is something the feminists absolutely hate. She's beautiful and successful, and she's got a family. And the feminists hate that. It undermines that whole victimhood, we're not successful because of the evil male patriarchy. And I have to be very honest, I'm not buying this idea that Ivanka Trump cried on Donald Trump's shoulder and convinced him to attack Syria. I have a feeling that was a desperate attempt at propaganda to get people to back off criticizing Trump for what he had done. Oh, well, he was just being a dad. Just being a dad, killing all those people and blowing up all those airplanes. Any father would have done the same thing. I'm not buying it until somebody gives me proof to the contrary. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network here. Now, over in California, they're talking about the Sanctuary City bill, and apparently the city council in Glendora, which is a city I'm very familiar with, I live very close to it when I lived in Southern California, they have sent a letter rejecting California becoming a sanctuary state. This is Senate Bill 54. Now, knowing Glendora as I do, it is probably one of the cities more detrimentally affected by the illegal immigrant influx. And they're fed up. They're fed up on that. Now, you know all this violence that we're seeing over in Europe from their immigration policy, it's starting to happen here. Apparently, assaults on Border Patrol agents are up 143% for the first half of the current fiscal year over the same period last year. They're being physically assaulted and beaten up by the illegal immigrants. Maybe it's time to give these guys, at the very least, pepper spray and tasers, if not outright guns. Now, do you remember that Dortmund bus attack over in Germany? And it turned out to be an Iraqi refugee asylum seeker? Well, it got even more interesting than that. He's a former leader of an ISIS unit. And the German immigration open borders thing, just let him in. They let in a former leader of an ISIS unit, and wow, imagine our shock, he commits an act of terror. Way to go, Angela Merkel. Now, the German Federal Criminal Police Office is showing that migrant crime has drastically increased. Apparently, a huge increase last year over the year before. And remember what I said, migration is a filtering process. You're not getting a cross-section of the population of the source country. You're not getting the best representatives of the source country. You're getting the people who couldn't make it there. You're getting people who are fleeing prosecution. You're getting people carrying contagious diseases. When you just open your borders without restriction, what comes across those borders are the people those other countries are happy to be rid of. Remember that brief time when the U.S. opened up the U.S. to Cuban refugees? And Castro went down to all of the prisons in Cuba, and he took all those people and he put them on boats and said, 90 miles that way. Now you're the Americans' problem. And South Florida became a huge crime zone because of it. Over in Sweden, where they're having a debate whether they should close the borders or ban cars, of their top 15 most wanted criminals, 14 are immigrants. And there's been an interesting development because apparently Swedish citizens are now filing criminal charges against the feminist government of Sweden for involuntary manslaughter through negligence. They might actually have a case, and that might be an interesting precedent for right here in the United States of America. That the government has allowed harm to come to the people through negligence and therefore should be paying for it. Now, this gets us over to a case that's happening in Herndon, Virginia, where a 40-year-old previously deported illegal immigrant has been charged with sexually abusing a 12-year-old girl multiple times. Apparently somebody decided it was okay to hire this guy for a daycare center. And apparently he didn't run the daycare. The daycare center was run out of a house in which he lived, and that gave him access to the children. And he just went and assaulted this 12-year-old girl multiple times. So I think the parents of that 12-year-old girl now have a case to go to the U.S. government and sue for negligence on the basis of this open borders policy that is being pushed by the globalists. Now, the Democrats, of course, are trying to find some way to stop the border wall funding. Paul Ryan and John McCain are now on their side. They're rallying Republicans to oppose building the border wall and strengthening our immigration policy. They're still on board with this globalist, let's blur everybody together, and yes, there's going to be rapes and drugs and diseases and murder, but it's a small price to pay for our dream of a global society and a single global private central bank. Congressional approval has dropped to 20%. It may not even be that high because these are numbers coming out of the corporate media. And by the way, the corporate media is out there trying to insist that Americans approve of what Donald Trump did in Syria. And I'm not buying that one little tiny bit. These are the same pollsters who told us Hillary Clinton was going to win in a landslide. Certainly the poll we ran here at whatreallyhappened.com is showing something very, very different. Now, over in Great Britain, the Remainers are still trying to find some way to undo the Brexit. We were reporting earlier in the week about how this German politician is demanding there be a new referendum, a second chance to rig the election. Because obviously the people of Great Britain were far too stupid to understand what Brexit meant. Actually, the British people are very smart, and Brexit is easy to understand. We don't want to be part of the European Union anymore. We don't want to be slaves to the European Central Bank. We don't want Brussels making our decisions for us. What part of that can you not comprehend? So now they're launching a new campaign to get a new referendum they can steal by claiming Russia hacked the Brexit vote. Anytime you don't get an election result that you don't like, oh, the Russians had to have hacked it. Absolutely, no question about it. Now, I love this next story. We put this one under the category of the woman scorned. Now, you've probably been hearing the tale of Robert Bentley, the former governor of Alabama, and he was forced to resign after an ethics investigation concluded he used state resources to conceal an affair with his advisor, Rebecca Caldwell Mason. He was catching a little on the side, having this little fling with one of his staffers, and he was using state resources as part of the process. It's a tacky no-no. Apparently under Alabama law, it's okay to have an affair, just don't use the taxpayer funds to do it. How this all came about, I love it. Apparently, Bentley had a state-issued cell phone and a state-issued iPad. And he wasn't really using the iPad, so he gave it to his wife for her to use, not knowing that the messaging traffic was syncing on both devices, and his wife was seeing the sexting messages he was sending to his staffer. And she didn't say anything, didn't let on she knew. She just started pulling together all the evidence and sending it over to the ethics people. Good for her. Good for her. I think that's great. If you're going to use technology, please understand it. Now, here's another tragedy from political correctness. This is the University of Texas at Arlington. And apparently, the way the story is going on is he's a straight student. And he was in a class with a gay student. And the story we're getting from this Thomas Cloak is the gay student was trying to hit on him. Thomas rebuffed him, saying, I'm not gay. At which point, the gay student made an allegation of sexual harassment against Thomas, that Thomas was saying all these gay-bashing things about him. And Thomas was punished for sexual harassment on the basis of the accusation. There was no proof. It was just the PC, oh, he's a gay basher, get him, get him. And they punished him, and this kid wound up committing suicide. He wasn't even given a chance to defend himself. In fact, as soon as the accusation was made, he was prohibited by the university administration from even talking to other people in the class who might have said, no, the gay guy was hitting on him. That's what happened. I mean, this is tragedy. The idea that any university, which is supposed to be educating our children to take part in our modern civilized society, is going to basically abandon the most basic principles of our government, which is the requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt before punishment is inflicted. But I guess the school administration said, well, if Trump can do it to Syria, we can do it to this kid. So let's talk about United Airlines. And I know a lot of people think it's just a distraction, but the story is just getting too good to ignore. We got to have some light moments on this show. I mean, we really have to. Okay, so what started this all is this video of this 69-year-old doctor. He was on a United flight. He was trying to get to some patients. And some people from the United Airlines crew came on board and said, we need to free up 4 seats. We're oversold. And they offered $800 inducement to anybody who would give up their seat, and nobody volunteered. So they picked 4 people at random to take off. 3 of them just knuckled under and went. And this doctor said, no, I need to get where I'm going. Find somebody else. And rather than pick somebody else, United Airlines got into this whole tyrant mode, and they called the police, who dragged this guy out of the seat. In the process, they broke his nose, knocked out 2 of his teeth, and left him bloody. And the video went viral all over the place. And United Airlines, in their subsequent actions, revealed just how corporate management thinks of ordinary American people, including their own fee-paying customers. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Update on Lois Lerner. Apparently criminal charges have been filed against her. Good. Lois, time to make a deal and stay out of small suburban Washington, D.C. parks here. Apparently the U.S.-led coalition actually was back on Tuesday, accidentally bombed the Syrian military. At least they're saying it's an accident. Who knows? All right, getting on back to United Airlines. So, story is, United Airlines, flight was full. They came on and said, it's overbooked. We need 4 volunteers to get on off. We'll give you $800. Nobody took it, so they picked 4 people at random. 3 of them went. 1, the 69-year-old doctor, refused. And rather than simply pick somebody else, and he said, I've got patients I need to get to. I need to get to where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. They called the police and dragged him off the airplane, broke his nose, broke 2 teeth. He's now suing for technically breach of contract. So, United Airlines and their media assets launched a smear campaign, leaking all this information about this guy, about his criminal past, and he'd done this and he'd done that, and they were out there trying to say, well, this guy had it coming. You shouldn't feel sorry for him. He's not a good person anyway. You know, he should have been beaten up by the cops years ago. And boy, did they goof, because they got the wrong person. The criminal they're talking about has a very similar name, but it is a different guy. So now, on top of breach of contract, this doctor can sue them for defamation. And it gets even better than that. As it turns out, the flight was not overbooked. What happened was United management wanted to get a flight crew to the destination airport. And they just walked onto the plane and said, give us 4 seats. So it wasn't really overbooked. They just, we're going to kick people. Yes, you've bought a ticket from us, but that doesn't matter. You're just cargo. We're going to kick 4 of you off because some of our staffers need to get on to someplace else here. And apparently today, on a United Airlines flight, a scorpion fell out of an overhead bin and stung a man. And right now, I can imagine the CEO of United Airlines saying, have you ever had one of those weeks? And it's not over yet, because Asians are now accusing United Airlines of discrimination and racism, and United stock has already dropped 4%. And I don't know about you, but I'm finding this incredibly, incredibly funny. All right, we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines for the rest of the program, 800-313-9443. Now, here is an interesting story. This came out of Blacklisted News here. And it's calling attention to the fact right now that the definition of terrorists has become very blurred and can be used to tarnish and harm people who are not really deserving of that. Anybody speaking out against the government can be labeled a terrorist. And according to a recent article in the VV Daily Press, law enforcement, first responders, banks, and schools now have the authority to put somebody on the terror watch list. You can be on that list just because some TSA person didn't like you, didn't like the way that you looked at them. Now, the U.S. Navy is apparently funding development of a robot surveillance system which can spy on humans in incredible detail. It's a $1.7 million grant to researchers over at Cornell who are working to build a system which can conduct surveillance as a single entity with many eyes. In other words, taking multiple video feeds and putting them together. And we really have become the surveillance state. And in the long run, I think it's another boondoggle. They can get all this information. How do they correlate it? How do they get something meaningful out of it? All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials. We'll be back with the rest of our show after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And just a couple of days ago, we heard Trump say that our policy in Syria has not changed. We're not going to go to war in Syria, blah, 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 blah. But according to Bloomberg's Eli Lake, Trump is considering sending anywhere between 10,000 and 50,000 U.S. troops into Syria, edging us closer to war with Russia. Now, I just had somebody write on in and said, this is really just a game of chicken. This is just a game of chicken. Nothing's going to come of it. At some point, somebody will blink. Not necessarily. I remember when I was in high school, and two other students got into a game of chicken, and neither one blinked, and they both died. Now, apparently it has been confirmed, Judge Napolitano was right. Britain's GCHQ did spy on Trump's associates and shared the intelligence with the Obama administration. What a corrupted mess. Okay, now then, back to the computer stuff here. Apparently over in Denver, the Denver police have developed their own ability to crack and search cell phones using a device called UFED, which stands for the Universal Forensic Extraction Device. It's from a company called Celebrite. And apparently it's the leading model of mobile phone data extraction tools in law enforcement. And apparently in the city of Denver, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution does not seem to apply anymore. And we're already hearing that travelers coming to this country from places like Britain will now be required to allow the full search of their cell phones and their electronic devices on crossing the border. All of which is pointless because we know that is what is going on. And anybody who is bringing data into the country will know not to have it on there. And we mentioned once before, you can get a micro SD card that'll hold 128 gigabytes, and you can hide it inside one of these hollowed out nickels. And there's no way for them to find that. It really is ridiculous. This is just a police state that is justifying itself by being a police state. It's like the military-industrial complex. It's become a power to itself. We call it the security-industrial complex. We need more surveillance, more money, more this, more that. There are bad people out there. No, the bad people are right here at home. They're the reason we're all living in poverty. Why we're tap dancing on the edge of a nuclear war. Okay, Google has now launched their fake news fact check. We mentioned it briefly yesterday. It's wide open to abuse. Google is not even taking responsibility for what it says is true or false. They're letting people come on and say, oh, this is fake news. And who's going to get onto an article and say this is fake news? Whoever's being exposed by it. And this is why, again, find other search engines. DuckDuckGo, Yandex. Stop using these compromised, complicit social media platforms. Anyway. Let's see. We have a call from Al in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was watching RT earlier on the redacted or whatever it is, redacted tonight or whatever. And one of the military guys, now I already heard about this before from somebody that was in the military that's real close to me, but now I see it on the news to where, and he was wounded, and then he comes, he's on there and they interviewed him, so you might check it out later tonight, and where they was loading planes. His job was to guard a plane, a cargo plane, and it was not loading the planes with 9 billion pallets, $9 billion worth of pallets into the plane to take to, I think he said Iraq, if I remember right. I kind of caught it at the end, though.
Yeah, that...
as soon as it hit me.
Yeah, that happened during the first Iraq War when they were going on over there. They were just, printing up all this...
No.
I know,
Mike.
It's happening again.
Right.
No, I was trying to establish there's a precedent for this of untraceable cash being sent into these war zones to buy off officials, to bribe officials, and so forth. Certainly it was not being spent to improve the life of the Iraqi people. All that money that was poured into Iraq after the invasion was over, they didn't get anything for it on the ground. It all went to corruption. And it's kind of amazing. It's like weapons. The U.S. government is sending military weapons and all of this cash over to other countries. At the same time, they're trying to say that we shouldn't have weapons or cash ourselves.
Well, let me finish here just for a few seconds, maybe 10. And what my other connection has, it was there on the ground, said that they had a convoy that they had to protect. It was delivering it to Afghanistan for the other side. For the other side. That's who they was paying, so they would keep fighting to keep the war going.
I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to figure out what would be the objective of that, to keep the war going.
Why did we get the wars to begin with?
The war was originally started because this consortium of oil companies back in the 1990s wanted a pipeline right-of-way, and the Taliban wanted a reasonable price for the pipeline rights, and the oil companies figured it was cheaper to get the U.S. to regime change Afghanistan than to pay the Taliban's asking price for the pipeline right-of-way. Plus, of course, in addition, once the Taliban was out of power, Afghanistan began producing opium again for America's drug lords.
Okay, well, I have a different perspective, but that's okay. But that's all I had to say. I just wanted to let you know that it's on RT, and you could probably find it because it'll be back on at 8 o'clock my time, Eastern time. So anyhow, you can check it out for yourself.
All right, well, thank you. I definitely will. I do have a little bit of a busy afternoon here. After the show, we're going to Skype with our new grandnephew, which is kind of interesting. Share a little story with you. Much of our family obviously is on the mainland, and so we do a lot of Skyping with them, and we have two other, another great niece, great nephew that we Skype with every single week, and they sort of grew up seeing us on the tablets and everything, and then finally we got to actually visit them in Indiana, and it was so weird to see them like come up and touch us because we'd just been flat people until that point. And so that was kind of a weird thing for them to go through. All right, back to the computer stuff. Interesting little article out of ZDNet, Windows XP, why it won't die for years to come. And they're just talking about all the people holding on to Windows XP as long as they can. And the article was sparked by the fact that earlier this week, Microsoft officially ended all support for Vista. It is now officially sunsetted, and I don't think anybody's going to miss it. It was one of the many epic failures. And but people are still hanging on to XP. The military has actually signed a contract with Microsoft for Microsoft to continue to support XP for the military, just not for you. And Microsoft is out there saying, why are people clinging to Windows XP? Well, I'll tell you from personal experience. At the time they started pushing the later operating systems, XP had had all the problems fixed. It was stable. It was fast. It worked. And computer users are getting sick and tired of being forced to upgrade stable working operating systems for the latest, greatest operating systems that arrive with thousands and thousands of bugs and more recently filled with spyware, all to make Bill Gates richer than he already is. In a functioning economy where we have the money to constantly be buying upgraded operating systems and then buy the upgraded applications that won't work with the new operating systems, we can go along with that. That economy doesn't support that anymore. And I think that's why more and more people are turning to open source and to Linux, because, yes, it's being upgraded and improved, but nobody's forced to go along with any of that. And the open source software generally compiles on pretty much any flavor of Linux that's out there. They have these wonderful automated configuration scripts that you run before you do the make install, and it goes on out and says, okay, this is what this machine does. I'm going to fix the compile so the software will work with it. And it's a really good working system. I'm having a lot of fun with my Raspberry Pi, and I'm trading emails with people about how things are going to work on it one way or the other. Now, as you know, this hacking group, the Shadow Brokers, got hold of all of these NSA hacking tools that had been leaked out, and they were on the dark net. And in response to Donald Trump's cruise missile attack on Syria, they released all of the NSA hacking tools. And while I understand their anger, I don't think this was a smart thing for them to do, because obviously these cyber criminals are going to be grabbing all these things. But it does provide an opportunity for computer security people to get these tools and start devising defenses against them for us law-abiding citizens. And now the passwords have been leaked out, so this stuff is now out there. And I'm still getting all these emails, well, if you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to hide. And my reply to that is, do you have curtains on your windows? Do you close the bathroom door when you go to the bathroom? Yes, we have needs for privacy. It doesn't necessarily mean we're doing something wrong. Speaking of United Airlines, story coming out of the Next Web is accusing Twitter of deleting negative tweets about United Airlines and its passenger abuse. And I would not at all be surprised. All these large, co-opted social media platforms, we're seeing it come on. There's censorship, there's filtering, there are all kinds of things where they're trying to prevent people from seeing your posts and not let you know what's happening. We've caught YouTube lowering the view counts on Claire's music videos many times because they don't want them to get up in the trending lists. Twitter and Facebook and Google are as compromised as the corporate media, and you need to start out understanding that. Getting on back to Microsoft, apparently cyber crooks are exploiting an unpatched Microsoft Word vulnerability to distribute the Drydex banking Trojan, and it's spread through booby-trapped emails, and apparently this Word hack works without needing to enable macros. Now, most security people will tell you disable macros on all of those Microsoft Office applications. If somebody is telling you got to turn the macros on, be very, very, very suspicious. What's interesting is this exploit was only discovered last week, and the fact that it's out there is showing that it's been a very rapid weaponization of the exploit. And where is the NSA in all this? Aren't they supposed to be protecting us from this kind of threat to our cyber infrastructure? Now, there's been a development regarding our privacy over in New York where law enforcement was demanding user data from Facebook. Apparently without a warrant. Facebook was refusing it. And this thing went up to a court in New York, and the court ruled that Facebook cannot refuse a demand for user data, and even worse, is not allowed to inform users their data is being requested by law enforcement. So what we're going to see here is it's fishing season. It's fishing season. The cops are just going to go through everything that you have on Facebook and look for something that they can use for civil forfeiture. And Facebook can't tell you a thing about it. And we know how out of control civil forfeiture is. Now, here is a really cool development. I cannot wait for this to actually hit the consumer market. Russia has developed a new disk media that is, for all intents and purposes, lifetime. It is predicted to be able to hold data securely for 100,000 years. It's even radiation-proof and can be used in outer space. And the disk is made of quartz glass, and it's in the same diameter as a CD. And this principle of data recording and retrieval is similar to that already in use of CD, DVD, and Blu-ray. It's just a brand new material. And apparently it involves laser nanostructuring of glass, which looks to me to be a refinement of that little system by which they'll carve sculptures inside glass blocks. So it's a write once, use many medium, but that's going to be wonderful. I remember years ago discovering that these CD recordables that we were being sold in the store, and oh, they're going to last as long as a regular CD, and then we discovered, no, after 2 years, the data vanishes. We lost the archives of some of the early work we did in our production company, Claire's music, animations that we'd done, and we archived them because we want to go back and make demo reels, and all of a sudden the data was disappearing. I feel really sorry for people who've stored their income tax data on CDRs, and they get audited, and they get out the CDRs, and all of a sudden it's all gone. That's going to be a big, big problem. All righty, let's see. We're going to start with a phone call. Nico in Southern California, and I'm going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling about that Facebook fake news reporting little button you can press on there.
Yeah.
Now, forgive me if you already covered this because I came in a little late in the show, but did you happen to look a little deeper into the News Literacy Project, which is one of the main things on there?
Yeah, I did, and I'm going to put you on hold for 3 minutes for commercials, and then I want you to come on back and tell us all about it. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and the ramping up of the fear for North Korea is continuing. The latest story now is that Kim Jong-un can put sarin in his rockets and rain it down all over wherever. Again, we saw all the same stuff leading into Iraq. All right, so Nico, you were talking about Facebook's new fake news reporting system and the organization behind it.
Well, I was, although there's an update on Kim Jong-un. I made to understand that he chews with his mouth open and his silverware scrapes on plates.
Well, nuke him.
Yeah, with
okay.
sarin-tipped nuclear weapons. Yeah. So there's apparently, I saw this Facebook, the News Literacy Project is what they're calling it.
Yes.
And apparently there's an ASU affiliated course called News LIT. And so I looked deeper into it, and what it says, what you'll learn, I'm going to read this, it's very brief. It says, in this course, you'll learn from some amazing folks who are part or keen observers of the news industry, including, among many others, Wikipedia's Jimmy Wales, Craigslist founder Craig Newmark, New York Times public editor Margaret Sullivan, and BuzzFeed editor Ben Smith.
In other words, all the gatekeepers.
Yeah, it's just, so you're going to hear from basically all the, am I allowed to, I guess the word I want to use I'm probably not allowed to say about these people. But you get my point.
Yeah, I do get your point, and thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're almost at the end of the program here, and we're going to close the lines. Let's see. There we go. All right, now then. Getting on to human-caused global warming. Down in the southern hemisphere, skiers are delighted. The snowy mountains in New South Wales just received their first blast of snow months ahead of the official start of the ski season. So once again, we're finding out all this snowfalls are now a thing of the past was just another corporate media lie. This thing with vaccines is getting out of control. The Telegraph is reporting that the World Health Organization is recommending, in fact, pressuring all governments to vaccinate boys for HPV to prevent cancer. And these are expensive shots. They're like 300 pounds for kids and 450 pounds for older people. And interestingly enough, only a year ago they were saying that you had less than a 0.1% chance of ever being exposed to cervical cancer, less than that if you're a guy. And now all of a sudden it's all over the news that 50% of the human race have been exposed to cervical cancer. Get your shot today. It's all about the money. It's all about squeezing the maximum amount of money out of you. And they don't care how. And they don't care if what they're selling you is actually bad for you. By the way, now that they're pushing pet vaccinations, they're starting to see autism in pets. I mean, it's ridiculous here. A little bit of good news. Monsanto's being sued for false advertising regarding their Roundup. And there's the music. Time for me to go on out and make silly faces at the newest member of our family. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with the lovely Lady Claire here on Republic Broadcasting. Please share everything you learn here with everybody else. It looks like they're going to ramp up in Syria. They're going to ramp up in North Korea. We are literally on the verge of a major global war. And we'll see you tomorrow. Aloha, America.